already when COVID hit that the supply chains across the world have been disrupted. Even as the sort of work to fight back against COVID proceeded, it was crystal clear that things were not improving on the supply chain. People couldn't get dishwashers and furniture and treadmills delivered on time, not to mention all sorts of other things. So why is it...
The tragedy of the treadmill that's delayed.
Right, the problem. But the serious point is, why didn't the president act sooner in a more aggressive way?
You complain about not having a treadmill? Settle down, Karen! What do you want to exercise? You've got Netflix and weed. Shut up. Get back to your cube. Be happy. Lower your expectation. And if you do go outside, if you notice the Walgreens is, for example, closed, and so is the CVS, because everything in there has been stolen by thieves who have now been redefined as civil rights protesters. Stop complaining, Karen. It's always been this way. Now, San Francisco has very few Walgreens or CVS's or stores like that left because they've all been looted by civil rights protesters. But that's not a problem, according to the mayor of San Francisco. In fact, as she explains in this amazing piece of tape, it's really Walgreens' fault.
Ultimately, they've made their decision. We have tried to work with them in order to ensure that we are covered in terms of having pharmacies all across the city. This is going to, of course, impact a lot of our neighborhoods.
What am I looking at right now?
But I wouldn't go as far as to say they can't do business. They still have a lot of stores. Everywhere you look, almost every corner, you'll see a Walgreens. And some of these stores are not just closing because of retail theft, they're closing because they're not necessarily bringing in the sales that they once did. So I don't want to attribute that completely to just retail theft.
Huh?
So you're sort of tempted to say, well, if you elect a mayor that dumb, then you kind of deserve what you get. But the truth is, not everybody in San Francisco voted for London Breed despite her alluring name. They don't deserve this. No one deserves this. The truth is, you shouldn't have daily looting in American cities because it's a first world country. This isn't some third world hellhole. This is, once again, the country that our ancestors built. It's a great country. It's a clean country. It's an orderly country. People don't steal. You're not allowed to steal. Okay? Period. But all of a sudden you can steal, and our leaders are telling you, you've always been able to steal. It's okay. You bring your kids to school and, oh, wait a second, there are junkies living in tents right across from your kid's school. Well, they've always been there too. They were there when you were a kid, you just never noticed. Just readjust your expectations. Settle down, Karen. Here's Seattle's mayor, Jenny Durkan, explaining that children are just going to have to deal with the junkies living in tents right next to their school. Here's a local news report from Seattle.
Broadview Thompson is a K-8 public school. Its property includes this greenbelt, which was taken over by dozens of homeless that neighbors say are bringing even more problems.
They calling me a liar?
I ain't calling you a truther.
This morning in my garden, I found an empty packet that had drugs in it.
Despite outrage from neighbors and parents whose kids are just now able to return to their school, 2 Seattle school board members are refusing to let the encampment be cleared.
Who does that?
Mayor Jenny Durkan decided not to intervene, claiming the public school property is private property and off limits without an invitation.
Yeah, so the one thing you can't do is expel the junkies, not the homeless. Homeless makes it sound like some sort of protected class of protesters. No, they're junkies. They're people shooting up, breaking into cars to support their habit.
Get ready to work.
Selling themselves, pimping out women. They're junkies, okay?
Damn!
And they're on your kid's school
You know
lawn.
what makes good license plates?
But we can't intervene in that because it's always been that way. Just lower expectations, Karen. In New York City, police have just been ordered not to intervene when they see junkies shooting up on the sidewalk or in a park. Can't get in the way. And you shouldn't, because we've always had junkies in our park. Sam Adams was actually smoking meth on the Boston Common once upon a time. In Washington, D.C., the Metro just basically shut down and pulled 60% of its train cars from service. So commuters, the ones who pay for it, are just have to find another way to get to work because the train service isn't working anymore.
Oh, snap.
Just lower your expectations. In fact, they're lucky. In Philadelphia last week, several people on a train, they got on the train and then they got to watch as a man raped a woman on the train for minutes. Witnesses describe what they saw to Fox 29 in Philadelphia. Here's part of it.
Oh, wait.
At Upper Darby's 69th Street station, passengers of the Market Frankfurt line are outraged.
The attack was brutal.
Okay, you've done the hard...
It was wicked, and the worst part is when the people were watching.
Several people watching, some within arm's length, says Upper Darby Superintendent of Police arrested his 35-year-old Fishton Noy, who investigators say is seen on a train security camera sitting next to the alleged victim, touching her, and then raping her. Investigators say a female SEPTA employee called in the attack, which was relayed on radio about the attacker disrobing on a train at 56th Street Station. SEPTA says Noy was arrested at 69th Street Station on the train in the act.
This has always been the way America works. Remember Kitty Genovese? The difference, though, we were shocked by that 55 years ago when she died. In this case, passengers watched this woman get raped, but they were on their phones. They were online gaming. The police chief of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania's transportation authority said that nobody who saw it did anything about it.
I can tell you that people were holding their phone up in the direction of this woman being attacked.
And by attack, just to be totally clear, and I hate to use the word, but it's the right word, she was raped in front of all these people. And they did nothing.
Wow.
To have this happen, you're always hearing about root causes. What are the root causes of this rape? We can tell you tonight, the 35-year-old Congolese man who apparently raped this woman, named Fiston Boy, has a criminal record and shouldn't have been here in the first place. He was on an overstayed student visa. He should have been deported. This should never have happened. He should not have been here. And the only reason he was is because he and a lot of people like him have been invited here and allowed to stay by the people who run the country, but who don't ride the train.
Yes.
This particular man first came to the United States in 2012 with a student visa. Now that visa ended in 2015 because he was no longer a student. Court records show that the boy racked up, quote, multiple arrests and 2 misdemeanor convictions, one for controlled substances and one for sexual abuse. Okay, so here's someone in the country illegally who is convicted of sexual abuse and drugs, but he's still here.
Oh no.
So why aren't people who allowed him to remain here in jail themselves? They certainly should. Now this guy was put into immigration detention back in January of 2015, but he never got deported because the immigration legal system decided that he should receive a special stay of removal. Oh, so we got what's called a withholding of removal from an immigration judge 2 years ago, back in 2018. According to court documents, that decision came after, quote, the Board of Immigration Appeals found the petitioner's misdemeanor sex offense was not a, quote, serious crime, just a minor sex offense, and therefore he was ineligible for withholding from removal.
Doesn't sound right.
So to recap, you can walk into our country with the invitation of our leader in public expense, overstay your visa, and doing mock our law. Then you can get busted for drugs and a sex crime, not supported, allowed to stay, and then you'll go on, probably inevitably to rape a woman on a train in full view of a crowd that does nothing to stop it. But it's always been this way. Don't get uptight. Readjust your expectations. You want more of this? We may be getting it. Today, Joe Biden's nominee to lead the Border Patrol, a guy called Chris Magnus, sat for his confirmation. Now, it turns out that Magnus, if anything, is left of Biden, even to the left of Barack Obama on immigration. That's a lot of damage. Just a year ago, when he was police chief of Tucson, Arizona, Magnus rejected a federal grant as part of the program called Operation Stone Guard that was supported by the Obama administration. Now, the point of the program was to help border towns fight cartel violence and drug trafficking. That would seem a worthy goal, not really directly related to immigration, directly related to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Americans.
Double nice.
But Chris Magnus, in his wisdom, rejected that money. His own police department was outraged by this, but Chris Magnus he's happy to abet the deaths of thousands of Americans by drug abuse. He said that this money and this mission, stopping drug cartels, didn't align with the work he's doing.
The whistles go woo!
That work, of course, is over. So here you have the person who's about to oversee our country's border security who does not believe in borders. Now, if that bothers you in any way, if you think we should be deporting rapists instead of letting rape women on trains, then the White House has a very clear message for you. Shut up, Karen. Stop complaining. Those arsonists aren't arsonists, they're mostly peaceful protesters. That treadmill? You don't deserve a treadmill. Lower your expectations. Get used to it. Whoa. Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. People say the federal government seems big, maybe bigger than ever. Well, it actually is the largest employer in the world, the federal government. Nothing else comes close. Not Google, not Amazon, not the Communist Party of China, nothing. How many people work for the United States government?
We got a sale.
Let's put it this way.
Great job out there.
What?
There are more than 100 countries around the world whose total populations, that is every man, woman, and child, are smaller than our federal workforce. Entire countries, many of them. The U.S. government, in other words, is astoundingly large, world historically big, scale without precedent, truly gargantuan.
You're absolutely right.
So what do all those people who work there do every day? You may be wondering that. Well, it's a good question. Actually, nobody's really sure, including many of the employees themselves. Fundamentally, the federal government is a mystery. Like the universe, it goes on forever. It makes you feel small thinking about it, which is probably the point.
You're right.
The good news is, every once in a while, our government does something you can actually understand. That happened recently when Joe Biden signed a $750 billion piece of legislation called the Inflation Reduction Act. What does the Inflation Reduction Act do? Come on, what are you, slow? The answer is right there in the name. The Inflation Reduction Act is an act that reduces inflation. It's an inflation reducing act. And that's welcome news because inflation is indeed a problem. In fact, voters say it's the problem they worry about most. So Congress has decided to reduce it. That's how things work in Washington. You identify a crisis and then you pass a law making it illegal. Crisis solved. It's simple. Getting too hot for you this summer? No problem. Just have Congress write a law banning high temperatures. It's effectively our climate change policy, and as we know, it works. The science on that has been settled. Don't deny it. Now Congress has decided to bring that very same approach to inflation. Just command it to go down. You can imagine how terrified inflation will be when it discovers it's being reduced by our all-powerful Congress. Wait, it'll say in horror. You passed an Inflation Reduction Act? Okay, fine, I surrender. Gas is now $1.50 a gallon, hamburgers $2 a pound.
Toy, hold on!
Sorry for the high prices. That's the promise of this act anyway. But in real life, a lot of people are still wondering, how is this going to work? Hillary Vaughn from Fox was wondering that. So yesterday, she caught up with Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia. Manchin is the man, the single man whose vote made this bill possible. Is the Inflation Reduction Act really going to reduce inflation, she asked? Here's how Joe Manchin responded.
When it comes to inflation, is it misleading to call this the Inflation Reduction Act for Americans when it's not going to make their grocery bill cheaper? It's not going to make everyday goods cheaper for them.
That's a lie.
Why would it? Well, immediately it's not, but we never seen anything happen immediately like today. It's turn the switch on and off.
So as Hillary Vaughn pointed out correctly, the law won't immediately make anything cheaper to buy. In other words, it will not reduce inflation.
Oh my God!
But Joe Manchin didn't deny this. He didn't seem bothered by it. In fact, his response was, why would it? Well, let's see, because you told us it would, you dishonest little creep. And then you printed another $750 billion of fake money, which is exactly the habit that caused historic inflation in the first place, all this fake money printing. So what's the upside of this bill exactly? Joe Manchin didn't say. Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland couldn't explain it either. Watch this.
I know that those who've been blaming President Biden for the inflation going up are now giving President Biden all the credit for inflation going down. So we're moving things in the right direction already.
Blah, 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 blah.
And what parts of the bill do you think will quickly work on that specifically?
Next question.
I'm Jamie Raskin. I'll say anything. What parts of the Inflation Reduction Act will actually reduce inflation? Next question, says Raskin. He actually said that out loud, as you just saw. In other words, you've caught me lying, and I don't even care. Go away, peasant. So as it turns out, and we hate to break this to you, the Inflation Reduction Act may be a classic example of misinformation. Imagine buying a bottle labeled shampoo and finding out the hard way it was actually drain cleaner. It's like that.
See?
So if there's one thing we can learn from the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, it's that in Washington, words no longer have any meaning at all. The empire has officially entered its postmodern phase, where there's no connection whatsoever between the sounds that emerge from the mouths of our leaders and observable physical reality. Congress might as well have called this the Eternal Happiness Act. And why not? That'll probably be the name of the next bill Joe Biden signs. And we hope so, because we are long overdue for Washington to ban sadness. They ought to get on that. Not that this bill was even thought about by Joe Biden. Not that he even noticed this bill. Biden doesn't get too caught up in the meaning of words these days. Biden is definitively post-literate at this point. Here was the scene as he signed his most recent legislative triumph.
Okay. Here you go. It's now law.
Okay, here we go.
Okay.
I might as well have put a sign on his desk saying, this guy has no idea what he's doing right now. Because he didn't, and it couldn't have been more obvious. The 1,000-yard stare was the giveaway. There were doughboys in Verdun who looked less shell-shocked than Biden just did. But the question remained, what was in the bill?
What?
Well, let's see. You'll be happy to know that this bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, includes $3 billion for the U.S. Postal Service to buy new electric mail trucks. So why would your mailman need an electric mail truck? No one has ever explained that, but your mailman is getting one. And China is getting even richer from the electric mail truck batteries, which it makes.
What? That is crazy.
So there's that. Then there's another $3 billion allocated to block grants for something called environmental justice. That'll be overseen by the EPA, which is to look after the environment, but now it's in the justice business. Environmental justice gets about $60 billion in this new legislation, which is great if you're in the environmental justice business, but it leaves the rest of us wondering, what is environmental justice actually?
What?
Well, according to the bill, it means, and we are quoting here, facilitating engagement of disadvantaged communities in state and federal advisory groups, workshops, rulemakings, and other public processes. Okay, that sounds confusing, but also expensive. In all, the EPA alone gets more than $40 billion in this bill, including more than $30 billion for so-called disadvantaged communities. What are those? Well, they're not really defined. People who vote for Joe Biden.
Come on, man.
So what it really means is the EPA is going to spread more identity politics and race hate. Are you sick of that yet? The Biden White House is not sick of it. They're all in. For context, to show you just how all in they are on that, the total annual budget of the EPA currently stands at about $10 billion. So this is a lot of money flowing to equity and the disadvantaged. And of course, everything hangs on definition. So who gets to define what disadvantage is, a disadvantaged community? Well, that would be the EPA's administrator, a guy called Michael Regan. This is a guy who's in his late 40s who has never had a single job in his life, never worked for a business. But he does have priorities. To give you some sense of what they are, we'll tell you what he told The Daily Show this year, and we're quoting. Everything I do at EPA is through the lens of environmental justice. Contracting, procurement, air quality, water quality, land management starts with, are we protecting the least among us, those who have lacked political representation and those who have not been at the table for decades, end quote. So really, this is about spreading race hate, as virtually everything that they do is. They call it equity. It's not about protecting the environment. And if you're wondering how the environment's doing, take a very close look.
Oh boy.
Anyone monitoring the chemicals in our water? No! We're busy conducting workshops for billions of dollars with disadvantaged communities. Right. So, that may not be helping the environment, but it's definitely not reducing inflation. Inflation reduction is not the same as protecting people who lack political representation. That's, of course, Joe Biden's base, the 81 million who voted for him. That's what this bill is really about, rewarding his voters. That would include virtually every bureaucrat in Washington. They do very well in this bill, of course, as long as they promise to spend it on equity, however they want to define that. There's $25 million for the Government Accountability Office to determine, quote, whether the economic, social, and environmental impacts of the funds described in this paragraph are equitable. The bill also calls for $10 million to be spent on equity commissions within the Department of Agriculture to combat racism, in other words, to commit racism. Really, not since the German government 80 years ago has any government ever paid closer attention to people's genetics. That's true. And yet no one notices it for some reason. Well, we do. There's more than $2 billion for the General Services Administration, something called the Federal Permitting Improvement Steering Council. That gets $350 million. The Bureau of Indian Affairs gets $220 million. The Office of Native Hawaiian Relations gets $23 million. And it's not just bureaucrats who are getting paid. There are billions of dollars in tax credits. Who do those go to? Joe Biden's donors. Of course, up to you. Are you in private equity? No. No, you're not. So you don't get any. Biden described these credits yesterday.
The Inflation Reduction Act invests $369 billion to take the most aggressive action ever in confronting the climate crisis and strengthening our economic, our energy security.
You are a liar!
It's going to offer working families thousands of dollars in savings by providing them rebates to buy new and efficient appliances, weatherize their home, get tax credit for purchasing heat pumps and rooftop solar, electric stoves, ovens, dryers.
For a second. So you watch that and you realize maybe they are going to run him again because he doesn't actually exist. He's merely a conduit through which they change America. He has no idea what he's saying. He reads the script. He seems kind of non-threatening and out of it. That may seem embarrassing to you, a problem to you. You wonder, what is the price range of all this? It's so demeaning and degrading. It's cruel to do this to a guy, feed him full of drugs, and have him read someone else's script. But if you're trying to change the country really fast, this is very useful to you. So again, to the bill, a nonprofit called Rewiring America, which supports this bill, decided to figure out how much money Americans are eligible to receive from the Inflation Reduction Act, based on zip code, household income, tax balance status. So according to Rewiring America, a married couple with one child in San Francisco, earning the median household income there of $120,000, would be eligible for nearly $12,000 in tax credits. But according to that same group, that same family of three making the median income in Youngstown, Ohio, for example, would be eligible for just $81 in tax credits. Ooh, that's weird. So, so the middle class gets shafted, while people making 120 grand in San Francisco make out. Okay. So most Americans who are making middle-class wages would be eligible for more savings only if they're willing to go out and spend thousands of dollars on things like a new heat pump water heater, an electric stove, or a heat pump clothes dryer. Right, none of which work very well. But the bigger issue is that all of these tax credits for Joe Biden's base are going to increase inflation. This is the same thing that happened to college tuition when the government subsidized it. It got much more expensive! Perfect! And that's already started. As the Washington Examiner has reported, electric vehicle manufacturers are now raising the price of their cars now that the so-called Inflation Reduction Act includes a $7,500 tax credit for electric vehicles. Quote, ahead of the Inflation Reduction Act, the tax credit of $7,500 for purchase electric vehicles, Ford and GM announced price increases at similar rates. You following this? So the government pays you back your own money to buy a product, and then the manufacturer of the product raises the cost of that same product by the same amount. Oh, so it's a subsidy for them, not savings for you. Last week, Ford announced price hikes between $6,000 and $8,500 for most of its lineup of its F-150 Lightning electric vehicles, while General Motors upped its electric Hummer costs by $6,250 last month. So what is that? They don't want to answer the question.
I want to touch it.
Because the only potentially deflationary aspect of this bill is the tax increase, which is, of course, probably not a good idea when you're in a recession. But our government is not willing to cut spending and stop printing money, so instead their solution is to take money from you. This is classic, right? So you print all the money you want because you hold the reserve currency, and then when inflation goes up, you just try and pull it out of the system through taxation. That's modern monetary theory. Look it up.
All right, well, the buyers got the product, and you got the profits.
According to the Congressional
Looks
Budget
like a successful
Office,
transaction
this act
to
will
me.
cost the middle class $20 billion a year in new taxes. The Joint Committee on Taxation has concluded that under this bill, 61% of taxpayers making between 40 and 50 grand will see a tax increase. 91% of Americans making between 75 and 100 will see their taxes go up, and 97% of Americans making between 100 and 200 will see their taxes go up.
Oh.
So if you're making 100 grand in Arlington, Virginia, are you rich? Oh no, you're barely scraping by. So it turns out that Biden was lying. Just yesterday he told us that no one making under $400,000 a year will see their taxes go up. Watch.
And I'm keeping my campaign commitment. No one, let me emphasize, no one earning less than $400,000 a year will pay a penny more in federal taxes. Folks.
Yeah, not a penny more. I mean, again, you can't blame the guy. He's just a mannequin. But whoever wrote that knew he was lying. There is one group of Americans who will not pay more under that bill, and that's Biden's donors, the richest people in the country. Thanks to the Democratic Party's hedge fund support, and they have a lot of that.
I'm excited and scared, and I think you're supposed to help me with that.
In the private equity world, the final revision of this bill keeps the carried interest loophole in our tax code. That means that people who work in finance, many parts of finance, are able to report their income as interest and pay half the taxes that you do. No one can defend this policy. It is indefensible. Even people who benefit from it will not defend it. They're embarrassed that they take advantage of it, of course. But it's a scam. Everybody knows it. And yet it remains in our tax code because they paid off the Democratic senator from Arizona and a bunch of others. So just in case the message wasn't clear, the bill gives the IRS another $80 billion to hire 87,000 new auditors. So what do those new auditors, those armed auditors at the IRS, have to do with a tax code this unfair? Well, the truth is, if you have a tax code this unfair and it keeps getting more unfair every year, you have to hire armed goons to make people obey, because they won't otherwise. 87,000 new armed IRS agents. How many is that? Well, for perspective, the IRS currently has about 78,000.
No, you are so dumb. You are really dumb, for real.
Total. So this bill will make the IRS larger than the army of the nation of Italy, also the nation of the Philippines, also the UK. What? Thanks, Joe Manchin. So what are all those agents going to be doing? Well, we're not sure, but we do have an IRS training video for you. Watch.
In addition to being accountants, we're also law enforcement officers, which is very interesting because a lot of the special agents that work for the IRS, they don't come from a law enforcement background.
What? Yes!
We get to do the same things like all the other law enforcement officers do. Things happen, we have to be able to respond, so we have to be ready.
So we teach our agents to fire a firearm to be able to shoot. We teach them defensive tactics and methods of defending themselves and protecting others as well. So they go through that entire process so that not only can they analyze records, but they also have that law enforcement component.
Whoa!
So in an actual democracy, IRS agents should be taught to be polite. But under Joe Biden, IRS agents are taught, quote, to shoot. How's that not war on the population of the country?
Wow. Yeah.
Possibility now of an all-out war between Israel in the north and Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. This is all along the northern border there, and they have fought wars before, 1982, 2006. And while that's happening, you got this view from Pyongyang, North Korea. Russia and North Korea teaming up, signing an armed aggression pact against the West in their strongest military deal since the Cold War. Kayleigh McEnany, co-host of Outnumbered, with us on this, and good morning to you. So we got a lot of things to talk about. I just want to put this on screen. These are the foreign crises.
Whoa.
Under the current administration going back 3.5 years. The Afghanistan withdrawal was number one, right? August of 2021. Ukraine war, Middle East war, Chinese spy balloon, China eyeing war with Taiwan. And you've got this Cold War style pact between Russia and North Korea. That was originally going back to 1961, and now they've revived this relationship, Kayleigh.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It's the first time Putin has visited North Korea in nearly a quarter of a century, and he's giving them legitimacy. North Korea, in return, is giving 11,000, according to U.S. assessments, containers of munitions along with ballistic missiles. I think, though, the way you put that out broadly is very important. My former colleague, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, wrote a long-form piece in Foreign Affairs about peace through strength and how, in retrospect, that doctrine looks pretty good right now. And he noted the sophisticated estimates we have out there that, Iran, 18 months, yes, from a nuclear weapon, but 2 weeks from having enough enriched uranium to go into that nuclear weapon. These are very, very huge, important times we're in. As voters go to the polls, I know economy's top of mind, but international affairs should be right there, given what we face.
And perhaps you can expect that to be the case on the debate stage next Thursday night. The Wall Street Journal editorial board saying this, Kayleigh, the Biden administration's behaved as if the world still wants to play by post-Cold War rules. The result is growing disorder.
That's stupid. Use your common sense.
And the menacing ambitions of anti-American states. If Mr. Trump has a better response than saying there were no wars when he was president, the American people would love to hear it. Makes you wonder where this goes in the debate.
Absolutely. That was a fantastic piece. And one of the things they honed in on was that Obama loved to talk about the international community. But some of these international organizations that embody the community, we can no longer quite trust to be on the right side. The UN, we see how much they penalize Israel vis-a-vis bad actors, the ICC.
Oh, wait.
Targeting Israel, targeting Western democracies. They've even targeted U.S. troops in the past, the G20, targeting America economically. So the international community, we can't just rely on that. It needs to be America first. And Trump needs to lay that out, how he will cleave wedges between North Korea and Russia and seize on disagreements in order to make the world a safer place.
Okay.
I don't think so, darling.
Welcome to a special edition of Jesse Watters Prime Time. Tomorrow, the DNC officially kicks off. The primetime team's already in Chicago causing some trouble. It's what we do best. But right before the Democrats' big day, Kamala made the biggest mistake of her campaign. She told us what her plans were. Kamala wants to control the price of food.
I will work to pass the first ever federal ban on price gauging on food. My plan will include new penalties for opportunistic companies that exploit crises and break the rules.
Princess Kamala wasn't supposed to have plans.
You should order some more games.
Whatever those
if
plans
the wizards
were,
ruined,
she was supposed to hide them until after the election. But now...
They're all classics, and I want them all, but it's your call, obviously. If we get enough variety in here, we might actually see some money coming in, too. Oh, yeah, and the upgrades tab is where you'll find some of my more, illicit innovations. That was deliberately cryptic. Welcome to the Lester tab, or the Lester and Paige tab, if I'm gonna give her her due. So, you want a drone base to launch all-out attacks on the normies? We got one. You want to run all your business interests spread out around the state from the convenience of one gaming chair? We got an MCT, Master Control Terminal, for that too. Even works for supply and purchase runs on the open road, whatever that is. LJT would be proud.
You got any extra money? Please.